G'day poker people, I'm all in with one of the biggest bluffs of my life. Make sure you stick around to the end to see the exciting conclusion to this hand, if I can get it through Florida Man or not. I start off playing some 2-5 at the Derby lane, but before long I'm invited to a massive 5-5-10 game, which is one of the most action-packed games I've ever seen. There are so many crazy hands to get to, so let's get to gambling, let's go. So we're starting things off in the 2-5 streets for 2,000 bangers, and for this very first hand we have a button straddle on. What a way to start the session. And then a tight aggressive small blind opens it to 40 bangers. But I'm next acting the big blind with pocket queens, baby. We are starting this session off with an absolute premium, and I actually think this is an interesting spot whether we want to 3-bet or just call. I think it's really close. The small blind is going to have a tight range here, opening out of position with the button straddle on, so there's definitely a reason to have strong hands in our flashing range. But then I go ahead and I look over to my left and I notice one of the players in early position going to grab some chips, and I'm like, okay, so they probably have a strong hand themselves. It just means there's a little bit more incentive for me to flat here and see what they go ahead and do. So I do throw in the call, and then said villain also throws in the call. Another caller as well before the button goes ahead and 3-bets it to 200. The small blind folds. Now the action's back on me. The villain has 1.2k effective in their stack. I think this is a good spot to spring the trap. I think they're going to have a lot of ace king, ace queen, pocket jacks, pocket tens in their range, being that they're 3-betting over people when there's so much incentive to squeeze. So I would love to get it all in against a range that has that type of hands. So I rip it all in for 1,200 effective. All the other players fold before the action's back on the button, who throws in the call. So very first interesting hand of the session, we've got an all-in flip. The villain asks me if I want to go once or twice, and I say one time for my LA sisters, baby. I expose my hand, and then we watch the board run out 10 high, and then the villain marks. So let's go. We are winning an all-in flip to kick the session off. Yeah, love to see it.
No. Trying to trap me.
I was trying to trap everybody. Next hand up, I'm in middle position with pocket kings. Let's go. We are looking down at some premiums today. I buff it up to 20 bangers, and then I get called by both of the blinds. So a total of 3 ways to a flop of jack 6 for rainbow. When the action checks to me, let's start trying to build a pot with this monster. I make it 20 bangers to go, and then I only get called by a tight aggressive small blind. So it heads up to a turn, which is the 10 of diamonds, putting in backdoor diamonds. Sure, jack 10 does beat us now, but when the villain checks it over to me, I think they've got a plethora of other jacks in their range, probably ace jack, king jack, and queen jack pure, and I think those hands are going to call a very large bet here. So I go ahead and make it 110 bangers to go, and then the villain thinks a little bit before throwing in the call. So we are loving that we are getting action with our kings, and then the river's the 10 of spades. Very good river for us. It just makes it a lot less likely that the villain does have jack 10 now, so when they check it over to me, definitely want to put in another large bet. I think this might be like the perfect spot to use my lucky number, something like 420. In game, I nerfed out a bit and I bet down to 325. Really not in love with this sizing. I think I can be much more greedy when jack is still a top pair. Whatever the case though, I made it 325, and the villain does throw in the snap call. So we love that we're getting paid here. I show my hand and the villain marks. Although, despite winning a big pot here, I am left wondering, could have it been even bigger? Next hand, the button straddles back on. You love to see that. And then the action actually folds all the way to my cutoff, and I peel a 7-3 of hearts. What is going on? I'm looking down at so many premiums today. Kind of joking, but I'm definitely going to raise this one up. I go ahead and make it 40, and then the button straddle throws in the call. So it heads up to a flop of jack 10-9 with 2 clubs. I'm going to check this one over to the villain. Probably have a lot of strong hands on this board, so not just trying to bluff into it with absolute air. So I check it over, but when they do check back, I think their range is a little bit weaker. I think if they had 2 pair plus, they definitely would have bet it. So when we see a turn that's a 6 of hearts completing the 4-card rainbow, I definitely want to go ahead and start trying to bluff the villain. I think they have a 1-pair hand at most, and I don't think that type of hand will be able to call 2 big barrels. So I start things off with a cheeky overbet here. I make it 100 bangers to go. Then the villain throws in the call. It's not quite ideal. When the river's a queen of diamonds, it's actually a really interesting one, because I think my opponent's going to have a lot more 2-pair and straight combinations. But the thing is, is Ace King got in as the absolute nuts here. And I think because I raised pre-flop, it's a lot more likely I have Ace King than my opponent does. And I don't really expect them to fold a straight here. But if they have 2 pair, I think we can find a size that even that hand will fold to because they're worried about the straight. So I think this is a perfect spot to bet my lucky number. I buff it up 420 bangers. Let's go. Fingers and toes crossed, the villain folds. And then the villain looks absolutely pained and he says out loud to me, "You got so lucky," as he shows Ace Jack and folds it. So yeah, mate, I definitely got so lucky because I'm raking in this pot after betting my lucky number. Next hand up, the under the gun straddles on, the best kind of straddle, and I'm first to act with King Jack offsuit. I raise it up to 30 bangers, and then I get 3 different callers. So we're 4 different ways to a flop of Ace King Jack rainbow. So always fun flopping 2 pair, but I will say if you do flop 2 pair, this is kind of one of the worst ones to have, just because I think pretty much all of the villains are going to have Queen 10 offsuit pure in their range, as well as some better 2 pairs. So when the straddle checks it over to me, I definitely do want to start betting. I think if we're going to get called by just a naked Ace X hand, this is probably the most likely straight we're going to get value from. So I definitely want to bet, but I'm going to proceed with a lot of caution going forward if the players really put money in this pot. So I make it 50 here, and then what do you know? The hijack raises to 175, and I'm already hating this, particularly when the button actually cold calls the 175. The straddle does fold and the action's back on me, and as I mentioned, I wanted to play this hand cautious if other people started putting money in the pot. I literally think both of these villains have 16 combinations of Queen 10, so very worried I'll lose to the straight. But even if they do have a weaker hand, it could still be a hand stronger than mine. Ace Jack most likely. So I really think this is a good spot to make the discipline fold, which is what I do. I'm staying disciplined today. I fold the King Jack, and then the other players are off to a turn, which is the 8 of hearts. The hijack bets 400, and the button rips it all in for 920. The hijack calls, and then the button shows Ace Jack of clubs, so they had us smashed, and the hijack has Queen 10 of clubs. So there you go. They had a royal flush between them, but either way, they beat me totally. River was the 6 of diamonds, and I am absolutely loving myself that I was able to get away from this one early. This next hand is an absolute doozy, includes one of the most action Florida men I've ever played with. So the hijack opens it up to 40, and then the action's on me in the cutoff with pocket 10s. Normally this would be a very easy 3-bet here, but the thing is the Florida man is in the big blind, and I kind of don't want to price him out of the pot. So I throw in the call here, the button does as well, and then the action player, unsurprisingly, goes ahead and 3-bets it up to 120. Then the hijack throws in the call. If the hijack had a hand that was stronger than 10s, he 100% would have 4-bet, and the big blind is in there with like doing this with 7 deuce probably. So we know that we have the best hand. Let's start building a pot here. I raise it up to my lucky number, 420 bangers, and then only the big blind action player calls. So it heads up to a flop of 985 rainbow. When the villain checks it over to me, let's get some value here. I make it 350, and then the villain check raises to 800. Now it's a little bit worrying because the villain can have all of the 2 pairs on this board in all honesty. Having said that though, if they were check raising with a 9x, I wouldn't be surprised either. And if they had total bullshit, I wouldn't be surprised either in all honesty. So cannot go anywhere yet. I throw in the call. We heads up to a turn, which is the King of Hearts putting out backdoor hearts. And then the villain keeps betting. He goes ahead and makes it 700. I am a little bit worried about this turn. I mean, I thought the villain was check raising with a lot of bullshit on the flop, but some of that bullshit just has a king, which now beats us, and not totally impossible they do have the 2 pairs either. But I think when they bet this small, maybe it's indicative if they still do have a hand like ace 9 that they're trying to get thin value with, knowing that they have a crazy image. So I really do think they have worse hands in their range, so cannot be folding yet. I do throw in the call, and then we heads up to the river, which is the 2 of hearts putting in backdoor hearts, and then the villain rips it all in for a little bit less than 1.5k effective, and they start dancing, they jump up and start humping the air, and it's bloody hilarious in all honesty. But realistically here, I don't think we can be hero calling with this hand, even against a very aggressive opponent. I just think they have too many king X in their range. If they backdoor to flush, I wouldn't be surprised either, and we still lose to all of those flop 2 pairs. So despite getting a really good price here in this over $5,000 pot, I do decide to fold my pocket 10s here, and the villain was actually kind enough to show us he had king 9, so let's go. We got away from this one on the river, but the villain gave us a little bit of a bad beat and is raking in this over $5,000 pot. GG, mate. So So a couple of minutes after that hand, our Florida man mate goes over to the semi-private game that he got invited to, but apparently he had a soft spot for me after winning that massive pot against me, and he actually asked if I wanted to play in that game as well, and I was like, hell yeah, brother, let's mix it up. So we're actually going into a semi-private 5-5-10 game. I asked him if I could film for the vlog. Everyone was happy with it, so we got the table footage for you, and we are chasing some losses in this bigger game. Let's go. Literally the first hand I sit down at the table, our Florida man mate straddles the button, and then I'm first to act in the small blind with pocket tens. I buff it up to 80 bangers, and then an unknown big blind who I've never met before 3-bets to 230. When the action's back on me, typically they should have a very tight 3-betting range with button straddle on being second to act, but I don't really know this opponent, so I think we can throw in the call here and see what they go ahead and do. I suppose all things being equal, it's more likely that they're 3-betting aggressive if it's the first action I've ever seen them take. Whatever the case though, I throw in the call, and then we heads up to a flop of ace 8-3 rainbow. Not a great flop for us. I check it over to the villain who does check back. Then we get a free turn, which is the bloody 10 of hearts. Let's go. We turn the bloody set here. Let's start building a pot. Don't think it's impossible at all that a villain did check back a single ace on the flop, particularly if it's a weaker one. So I want to target the strongest part of their range here. So I go ahead and bet it for 325, and then the villain raises to 725. Was not expecting that at all. I think if they did have pocket aces, they might check it as a trap on the flop, but if I think they can have pocket aces, they can probably have ace 10 as well. I guess they could have trapped with pocket eights. We haven't ever played with this villain or met them before, so not totally impossible that they are just running a bluff, although it would be a bit weird with the min click. Whatever the case though, way too tight to be folding this hand first hand, so I go ahead and rip it all in for a little bit less than 1.8k, and the villain snap calls. Not the best sign in the world. They ask if we can go twice, and I'm new to this game, so I don't want to be an asshole and insist on once, so I'm like, sure. And then he shows the pocket aces. Oh my god, we get set over set in the first hand, and I've got one out 2 times, and I don't hit it either time. And literally the first hand we play in the bigger game, we get set over set. What is going on? Of course, we're not done gambling yet. We're back in there for 2,200 bangers, and let's chase these losses, baby. Let's bounce back. In this next hand, I'm under the gun with ace queen. I make it 40, and I get called by all the blinds, including the straddle. So we're 3 ways to a flop of 9, 8, 6 with 2 hearts. When the action checks to me, not trying to stab ace high into 3 different people, I check it back, and we get a free turn, which is the queen of clubs. Let's go. We make top. Then the small blind checks, and the big blind bets out for 75. When the straddle folds, I think we have a pretty clear-cut call here. Very likely we do have the best hand. I think if the villain has the worst queen, he's going to bet out, but I have to be a little bit cautious because I think they're going to have a lot of 2 pairs on this board. Jack 10s are nuts as well, so I just decide to call here, see what happens on a river. The river's a 5 of clubs, and then the villain goes ahead and bets 300. Now honestly, I'm very concerned that the villain does have Jack 10 or 2 pair, particularly when they use this large of a size. I think if they had king queen, they probably would either bet a smaller size or check, so I really think it's another good spot to make a disciplined fold here. So that's what I do. I get away from this one. So in this next hand, we see the return of the small blind bounty game. Haven't seen this one since Australia. So it starts off with everyone at the table, and he's 25 that literally goes on the physical button, and if the small blind wins any hand, they're going to collect all the money on the button, but if they lose the hand, they have to add an extra 25 to the button. So as you can imagine, really hard to win a hand from the small blind, so the money accumulates over time, and there's already 325 bangers on the small blind bounty for this one. When the action folds to the small blind and they open it for 75, I'm in the straddle with queen 8 offsuit. I think I want to be defending really wide here. I think the villain's going to have an extremely wide range, and we just don't want to let them get away with stealing. So I throw in the call, and we heads up to a flop of 4-3 deuce with 2 hearts. When the villain checks it over to me, I think if they had a strong hand at all, they definitely would have gone ahead and bet, since it's going to look like they're bluffing with the small blind bounty on, so I definitely want to start stabbing. I make it 50 here, and then the small blind throws in the call. So we're off to a turn, which is the jack of diamonds. When the villain checks it over to me again, the same thing that I said on the flop is true here. I think the villain has a weak range. Let's keep stabbing. I make it 100 bangers to go, and then the villain throws in the call. So a little bit of a concern there. We're heads up to a river, which is the ace of clubs. The villain checks it over to me again. Now, I think the villain would have had a lot of ace high hands that were planning on check calling, trying to win the small blind bounty, but If they have any hand worse than ace X, I can't imagine they're going to call a third barrel. So I want to use a bluff size here that's not absolutely massive, since the villain can just call me with an ace, but something big enough to fold out a hand that's like pocket eights. And I decide that size is 300 bangers. I bet 300, and then the small blind folds. So let's go. We're taking this pot down with queen high. So we decided to suspend the small blind bounty game. The game was a bit short-handed and we want to wait for it to fill out a bit more. So in this next hand, our action mate, Florida Man from the cutoff, raises it to 75. Then I'm on the button with 10-9 of clubs. Absolutely mandatory 3-bet spot to try and get the pot heads up in position. I make it 250 and then the villain throws in the call. So it heads up to a flop of King Jack 7 rainbow with 1 club. When the villain checks it over to me, I think a double gutty's a perfect hand to semi-bluff with. I make it 200. The villain throws in the call. So it heads up to a turn, which is a 6 of clubs, giving us even more equity here. Then something very unexpected happens. The villain actually leads out for 400. I think they could be doing this with a king or another strong pair. Also a bunch of draws on this board, queen 10, ace high clubs. So I don't think we can do anything but just call, particularly since we have position and we're getting a great price with the draw. So I throw in the call. Off to a river, hoping we hit, and the river is the 3 of hearts. We do not get there. The villain checks it over to me, and I have about 2k in my stack, and I absolutely do not want to rip it all in. I think if the opponent has a king, he will snap call me, and even if he has a worse pair, I'm going to say this villain leans slightly more on the sticky side, but I can't check back 10 high, man. It's just not in my blood. So I decide to put in a small bluff, really just bluff targeting queen 10 or ace X of clubs that missed. So I go ahead and make it my lucky number, 420 bangers. Then the villain is in the tank 60 seconds, which is pretty painful because I know he has a weaker pair here and he's not folding. I wanted a snap fold here, not a tank fold or a tank call. So the villain ends up throwing in the call 60 seconds later. I proudly table my bluff, and then the villain slams down ace jack and screams, "I knew it!" And I'm like, oh, god damn it. I wish you didn't know it, mate. Next hand up, the small blind bounty's back on, and then under the gun raises it up to 40, and I'm on the button with ace jack of hearts. Really could go either way between 3-betting and calling here. I think calling's a little bit better since the small blind is going to V-pip so often. We sort of want to give them the opportunity to maybe even squeeze, and then we can assess where we are. So I throw in the call here. The small blind does actually fold, and we end up going heads up to a flop of 8-6-6 rainbow with 1 heart. When the villain c-bets for 55, very decent chance we have the best hand with ace high, and even if we don't, we probably have a lot of outs to improve, particularly with backdoor hearts. So I throw in the call, and we're off to a turn, which is the jack of spades. You love to see it. The villain keeps betting for 125. Consider raising very briefly here, but I think it's a lot more likely the villain is bluffing, and not totally impossible that they just do have an overpair here. So I just throw in the call, and then we're off to a river, which is the king of hearts, not the best one in the deck at all. And then the villain thinks a little bit before going ahead and betting 325. Not loving it. I think they're going to have a lot of king X hands in their range, but my logic was if I called on the turn instead of raising, it was to keep the villain in with bluffs on the river. And even though this isn't a good river, they could just be bluffing with an ace high type of hand. They don't always have to have a king. So I do decide to throw in the call, and then the villain shows king 10 offsuit, and I'm like, god damn it, I had every opportunity to win this pot, but I had to get greedy and keep inducing bluffs. You can literally see it in my shaking hands as I mark things are not going my way this session, and it's getting to me a little bit, but no excuses. I think we are playing well. We just need to lock in and keep that up if we've got any shot of getting unstuck. Next hand up, I'm under the gun with pocket 9s. We're playing short stacks, but I buff it up to 50 bangers, and the action folds around to our Florida man mate in the straddle, who goes ahead and 3-bets to 300. When the action's on me, I'm trying to have a bit of a banter with him, and I've only got 1.2k effective in my stack, so I think it's a pretty clear cut all in here against a very wide range. So I actually say to the guy, any other motherfucker, I would fold this hand. And I was about to say, but I'm all in, but before I can even do that, the villain cuts me off and he says, I don't give a fuck. You go all in. I'm going to call. And he literally slides out a stack of green chips. I'm not really sure what to make of it. Honestly, I think maybe it's a little bit weak and he's trying to intimidate me, which is just all the more incentive in the world for me to go all in here. I rip it all in for 1.2k effective. And then the villain, I don't know if he was like obliged to call with the previous action, but he calls anyway. So we are heads up in an over $2,000 pot for a flip. I show my hand. The villain shows ace king, and we've got the live run out. And And you can see there, king on the flop. We hate to see it. We got one out and it misses on the river. We end up losing this flip and we're sending back to the cashier to rebuy again. You hate to see it. Another 2,000 bangers in the mix. We are not going to get unstuck by leaving. Let's get back into it and chase these losses. Next hand up has the button straddle on, and then an aggressive big blind opens it for 75. The straddle calls, and I'm in the hijack with pocket aces, baby. If I'm going to get unstuck with any hand, this is the one to do it with. I buff it up to 300 bangers, and then only the big blind calls. So we're heads up to a flop of Jack 8-4 Rainbow. When they check it over to me, let's start building a pot with my favorite hand, lower the SPR. I go ahead and make it 200, and then the villain throws in the call. So over 1,000 bangers in the middle to a turn, which is a 7 of spades. Definitely not the best turn in the world. Pretty much all the straight draws get in, as well as 8-7. But when the villain checks it over to me, definitely want to continue to bet for value. If the opponent has a Jack X hand, we really just want to lower the SPR to try and stack that hand on the river. Not totally impossible that they do have pocket queens or pocket kings either. So I go ahead and make it 350 bangers. And then the villain thinks for a little bit before ripping it all in for 1.5k effective. And I absolutely hate it. 9-8 got in, 8-7 got in, 6-5 got in as well for what it's worth. This is an aggressive villain though, so not totally impossible that they're turning a hand like pocket 10s or pocket 9s into a bluff, knowing it's going to put my overpairs in a really gross spot. But I think they just have too many strong hands in their range for me to go ahead and make the hero call here. So yet again in this session, I make another disciplined fold. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. So our stack is dwindling down, so we have to top up yet again, in for another 1,500 bangers, and hopefully this can be the buy-in, or the top up rather, that helps turn things around. Next hand up, the small blind bounty's back on, 350 bangers, and I'm actually in the small blind, so I have an opportunity this time. An aggressive under the gun player makes it 50, then our action Florida man makes it 150 from the button, so probably want to be 4-betting pretty aggressively here. I think it's likely that either of the villains just have a bunch of weak hands in their range, so when I peel 8-7 of clubs, perfect spot to go for it. My initial instinct is to rip it all in for 2.4k, but I actually don't think we need to risk that much. Obviously, we're absolutely cooked if we get action with this hand. I think it's a good spot to 4-bet to a smaller size, something like 500 bangers, which is what I decide to do. Fingers and toes crossed that everyone folds, and then what do you know? Everyone folds. Let's go. We're winning the pot as well as the bounty. Have to show my hand to collect the bounty, so proudly table that one, and we are finally winning a small blind bounty, and maybe things are turning around in this session. Next up, our action Florida man mate makes it 75 in the hijack, and I'm in the cutoff with Jack 10 offsuit. Now, of course, I want to be 3-betting our mate very wide here, trying to play the pot heads up in position against a wide range. I think Jack 10 offsuit probably a little bit too loose. I mean, Jack 10 suited, totally fine, but this one just a little bit too loose. But folding is boring. I buff it up to 250, and then the villain puts in the 4-bet to 500. Now, when they min click and we have position on them, I really don't want to be folding anything. A little bit dicey since we do have a pretty trash hand, but folding is boring. I throw in the call here, and somehow we're playing $1,000 pot with Jack 10 offsuit, and we're off to a flop, which is King Queen 3 with 2 spades. So we do have the open ender, which is pretty nice. When the villain c-bets for 400, I do think they are going to have a lot of strong hands on this board, but I'm not going to be folding yet. Honestly, if they do have a strong hand, we just have the absolute power to cooler them on an ace or a 9 turn. So I throw in the call. We're off to a turn, hoping for the ace and the 9, and the turn is the 8 of clubs, putting out backdoor clubs, and then the villain goes ahead and bets 400 bangers yet again. Now, I think when they use the same size twice, it is indicative of a little bit of weakness, maybe something like ace queen or pretty much any queen that they're being a little bit hesitant with, but they don't want to give off a free card to a flush. Because they do have this weakness, I actually think this might be a really good spot to rip it all in as a bluff. Going to be very hard pressed for them to call off with a single queen. They got to worry that I have all of the 2 pairs or sets on this board. So I decide to go for it. We clench our sphincter and we rip it all in for 2,100 bangers, hoping the villain folds, and then the hijack literally stands up at the table and he starts ranting, I don't care if I beat, I'm not folding this, I call, and he shows King 9 of clubs, so he actually has top pair with the club draw. He blocks many of our outs on the river. I inform him that you're good. for now, and we are off to the river. We have fingers and toes crossed that we can get there on a 9 or an ace that is not a club. We've got 6 outs to win this hand, and then the river is the 9 of hearts, baby. Let's go. We dish out the bad beat to Florida Man in this over $6,000 pot, and man, maybe our turn rip was a little bit of a punt, but we get rewarded for the degeneracy. You absolutely love to see it.
Lucky river.
Wow, he actually had one of the 9 out.
I know.
So he had a 9 in his hand,
You did.
right? So there's only 3 9s and 4 aces.
So what a way to wrap up the session. We did actually play another 2 hours. Unfortunately, Florida Man was not super happy after that bad beat on the last hand, and he did decide to leave the game. I still think he was up a few $1,000s on the day, but whatever the case, he ended up leaving. And I did play another 2 hours, don't want to hit and run too much. And I played a few more interesting hands, but of course, nothing is going to be able to top the drama of that last hand we played. So after the 2 hours, I did decide to leave, and we ended up racking up our chips, and let's hop into the results. So there you have it. Those were the most interesting hands over this 10-hour, 20-minute session. Absolutely a marathon session here. Ended up playing somewhat well. Maybe was a little bit loose and aggressive with my VPIPs. Too much so towards the end. I mean, the Jack 10, obviously it worked out fantastic for me, but took a very punty line with it and kind of just got lucky on the river. So I'm going to land on a B grade for today. Definitely plenty of room for improvement, but I am happy with a lot of the discipline laydowns I made, and definitely playing this many hours is always going to be good to get volume in. So landing on a B grade today. In terms of the results, my subpar performance was pretty much capsulated by the results. Ended up losing 2,695 on the session. You hate to see it. If you want to watch a video of me running and playing a lot better than this one, I'm going to put a video up on the screen now of an absolute sun run of a session, which is hopefully a bit of a palate cleanser after this one. For now though, I'm out of here. GG Gamble Gang.